The Boeing 737 sits on the tarmac at Tamanrasset Airport in the heart of the Sahara Desert, its white fuselage reflecting the brutal afternoon sun. Inside the cockpit, the captain slouches in his seat, barely glancing at the instruments as he runs through what should be a thorough pre-flight inspection. His movements are lazy, perfunctory, going through the motions without real attention or care. The first officer watches with growing unease. He has flown with this captain before. He knows the man's reputation. Sloppy, complacent, cutting corners, taking shortcuts. The kind of pilot who has been lucky so far, who has gotten away with his negligence for years, but whose luck cannot last forever. Today, that luck will run out. In less than 2 hours, this aircraft will be a smoking crater in the desert. 103 people will be dead. And the investigation will reveal a cascade of errors, shortcuts, and negligent decisions by a captain who simply did not care enough to do his job properly. A captain whose laziness and disregard for procedures killed everyone who trusted him with their lives. Before I walk you through every negligent decision this captain made, if you want to understand how professional pilots can fail so catastrophically, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This story will anger you, because every death was completely preventable, and the captain knew better. I am Captain Paul Henderson. 25 years in commercial aviation have taught me that flying is not inherently dangerous, but it is utterly unforgiving of carelessness, negligence, and complacency. You can get away with cutting corners for a while. You can skip checklist items and survive. You can ignore warning signs and land safely. But eventually, inevitably, those shortcuts catch up with you, and when they do, people die. Today I am going to tell you about Air Algérie Flight 6289 and how one captain's systematic negligence, his refusal to follow basic procedures, his complete disregard for safety protocols, resulted in one of the most preventable accidents in aviation history. This is not a story about bad luck or unforeseeable circumstances. This is a story about a pilot who knew exactly what he should do and chose not to do it again and again until those choices killed him and everyone aboard his aircraft. Welcome aboard. March 6th, 2003, a Thursday afternoon, Tamanrasset Airport in southern Algeria, deep in the Sahara Desert. The temperature is scorching, well over 40 degrees Celsius. Heat shimmers rise from the desert sand that stretches to the horizon in every direction. The airport is small, serving primarily domestic flights within Algeria and occasional international charters. On the ramp sits a Boeing 737-600, operated by Air Algérie, preparing for a flight to Algiers, the capital city on the Mediterranean coast. It is a charter flight, carrying Algerian government officials, oil company workers, and their families back to Algiers after meetings and site visits in the southern desert region. 103 people board the aircraft. Men in business suits wiping sweat from their foreheads as they climb the stairs. Women carrying young children. Teenagers traveling with school groups. They seek relief in the air-conditioned cabin, grateful to escape the brutal desert heat. They settle into their seats, expecting a routine 90-minute flight north across the Sahara to Algiers. The crew consists of 2 pilots and 4 flight attendants. Captain Mohammed Ben Merabet occupies the left seat. He is 58 years old with over 15,000 hours of flight time. He has been flying for Air Algérie for over 20 years. He should be at the peak of his career, a respected senior captain, a mentor to younger pilots. But he is not. Among Air Algérie pilots, Ben Merabet has a reputation. He is known for being sloppy, for cutting corners, for taking shortcuts. He does the minimum required and sometimes less. Other pilots avoid flying with him when possible. First officers who are paired with him know they need to be extra vigilant because he cannot be trusted to do things properly. First Officer Karim Boudra sits in the right seat. He is 34 years old, with 4,000 hours of flight time. He is competent, careful, professional, but he is also junior to Ben Merabet by both age and seniority. In the hierarchical culture of Algerian aviation, challenging a senior captain is extremely difficult, especially when that captain has a history of responding aggressively to criticism. The first sign of trouble appears during the pre-flight inspection. Captain Ben Merabet barely looks at the paperwork. The aircraft logbook shows a minor write-up from the previous flight, a note about the engine fire detection system showing intermittent faults. Maintenance has inspected it and signed it off as acceptable for flight, though they recommend further testing at the next scheduled maintenance check. A thorough captain would review this write-up carefully, perhaps conduct additional tests of the fire detection system before departure. A cautious captain might even defer the flight until the system could be more thoroughly inspected. But Ben Mirabet just signs the paperwork without reading it, accepting the aircraft without truly verifying its condition. First Officer Boudre notices this, but says nothing. What can he say? The maintenance team has signed off on the aircraft. The captain is in command. Boudre's role is to support, not to second-guess. The external walk-around inspection is similarly perfunctory. Ben Mirabet walks around the aircraft quickly, barely glancing at critical components. He does not check tire condition carefully. He does not inspect the engine intakes for foreign object damage. He does not verify fluid levels or look for leaks. He just walks around the aircraft quickly, checking boxes in his mind, fulfilling the minimum requirement. Boudre, who conducts his portion of the walk-around much more carefully, again notices the captain's sloppiness, but does not comment. This is how Ben Mirabet operates. Everyone knows it. The airline knows it. But he's been flying for decades without a serious incident, so his behavior is tolerated. In the cockpit, the pre-flight checks continue in the same careless manner. Ben Mirabet rushes through checklists, not actually verifying each item, but simply confirming them verbally without looking. When Boudre reads a checklist item, Ben Mirabet responds, "Checked," before actually checking it. The fuel quantity is one critical item that Ben Mirabet fails to verify properly. The flight plan shows they need a certain amount of fuel for the 90-minute flight to Algiers, plus required reserves. The fuel gauges show sufficient fuel, but Ben Mirabet does not cross-check the gauges against the fuel slip from the refueling truck. He does not verify that the amount uploaded matches what was ordered. He just glances at the gauges, sees numbers that look reasonable, and moves on. This is a critical error that a proper pre-flight would have caught. The aircraft has been fueled, but not with the amount required. Due to a miscommunication between the flight crew and the ground crew, the refueling truck uploaded less fuel than specified in the flight plan. The aircraft has enough fuel to reach Algiers under ideal conditions, but it does not have the required reserve fuel for contingencies, holding, or diversions. A captain who carefully cross-checked the fuel slip against the gauges and the flight plan would have immediately noticed the discrepancy. But Ben Mirabet does not bother. He assumes the fuel is correct because it usually is. He takes shortcuts because he has taken them 1,000 times before without consequence. At 3:42 in the afternoon local time, Flight 6289 is cleared to push back. They start engines, complete the after-start checklist with the same rushed incomplete manner, and taxi toward the runway. Tower clears them for takeoff at 3:57. Ben Mirabet advances the thrust levers. The 737 accelerates down the runway and lifts off into the hot desert air. The departure is technically acceptable, though Ben Mirabet's control inputs are rougher than they should be, his flying lacking the smooth precision of a truly professional pilot. As they climb northward across the desert, everything seems normal. The engines run smoothly, the systems function properly. The weather ahead is good. It appears to be a routine flight. But at 4:12, 15 minutes after takeoff, a warning light illuminates on the instrument panel. Engine fire warning, left engine. A red light, accompanied by a warning tone, indicating that the fire detection system has sensed heat or smoke in the left engine compartment. This is one of the most serious warnings in aviation. An engine fire can spread rapidly, causing catastrophic damage to the aircraft. The immediate response is drilled into every pilot from their earliest training. Identify the affected engine, close the fuel valve, discharge fire suppression agent, prepare for emergency landing. But Ben Mirabet does not follow the procedure. He looks at the warning light, frowns, and says, "It is probably a false alarm. That system has been having problems." He is referring to the maintenance write-up he did not bother to read carefully. The fire detection system has shown intermittent faults. Maintenance believed they had resolved the issue, but clearly there is still a problem. The question is whether this is another false alarm or an actual fire. First Officer Boudre is alarmed. "Captain, we should follow the fire checklist. We should discharge the fire bottles." Ben Mirabet waves his hand dismissively. "It is a sensor malfunction. If there was a real fire, we would see other indications. Look, the engine parameters are all normal." He is partially correct. The engine instruments show normal temperatures and pressures. If there were a major fire, they would expect to see temperature spikes or pressure drops. But small fires can occur in engine compartments without immediately affecting engine operation, and those small fires can quickly become large fires. The procedure is clear. If you get a fire warning, you treat it as real until proven otherwise. You execute the fire checklist. You discharge the fire suppression system. You shut down the engine if necessary. You do not assume it is a false alarm and continue flying. But Ben Merabet does exactly that. He silences the warning tone and continues flying. Both engines operating, fire warning light still illuminated, doing nothing to address the potential emergency. Baudra is deeply uncomfortable with this decision, but does not push harder. The captain is in command. The captain has far more experience. If the captain says it is a false alarm, then maybe it is. Baudra wants to believe that, wants to trust that Ben Merabet knows what he is doing, even though everything in his training tells him this is wrong. They continue flying north. The fire warning light remains illuminated. Ben Merabet ignores it. He is convinced it is a sensor fault, another false alarm in a system that has been problematic. He does not consider the possibility that the maintenance team failed to completely fix the problem, or that there might actually be a fire despite the engine instruments appearing normal. At 4:29, 17 minutes after the fire warning first appeared, new indications emerge. The left engine oil pressure begins dropping. The oil temperature starts rising. These are signs of serious engine problems, potentially fire damage affecting engine lubrication systems. Now Baudra is insistent. "Captain, the engine is showing problems. We need to shut it down. We need to land immediately." Ben Merabet finally acknowledges the seriousness of the situation. "Okay, we will shut down the left engine. Prepare for single-engine operation." But even now, he does not follow the proper procedure. He does not declare an emergency with air traffic control. He does not request priority handling for an immediate landing. He does not discharge the fire bottles that might extinguish whatever fire is burning in the engine compartment. He just shuts down the engine, closing the fuel valve and bringing the throttle to idle. The left engine spools down, the turbine blades slowing, then stopping. The aircraft is now flying on one engine. A Boeing 737 can fly safely on one engine, but it cannot maintain altitude as easily, especially in the hot, thin desert air. They begin a gradual descent. Ben Merabet finally contacts air traffic control. "Algiers control, flight 6289. We have shut down the left engine due to indication problems. Request descent and vectors to the nearest suitable airport." The controller responds immediately. 6289, Roger. Are you declaring an emergency? Ben Merabet hesitates. Declaring an emergency means paperwork, investigations, questions about why he did not follow procedures when the fire warning first appeared. Negative, not declaring emergency at this time. We are flying normally on one engine. This is another critical error. By not declaring an emergency, he does not receive priority handling. Other traffic is not immediately cleared from his path. Emergency services are not alerted. The controller treats this as a precautionary measure rather than a dire emergency. But the situation in the left engine compartment is deteriorating rapidly. Whatever fire was burning has now damaged critical components. The fire has spread beyond the engine itself into surrounding structures. Hydraulic lines are failing. Electrical wiring is burning. The fire suppression bottles that Ben Merabet never discharged could have contained this fire earlier, but now it has spread beyond what the bottles can handle. At 4:34, the fire burns through hydraulic lines that provide pressure to critical flight control systems. Suddenly, the aircraft becomes much harder to control. The ailerons, the control surfaces on the wings that allow the aircraft to bank left and right, lose hydraulic pressure. The spoilers, which help control descent and increase drag, become less responsive. Ben Merabet is struggling now, using much larger control inputs to keep the aircraft stable. The 737 is fighting him, the controls sluggish and heavy. "We need to land now," Baudra says urgently. "Right now. Anywhere." Ben Merabet finally declares an emergency. "Algiers control, 6289, declaring emergency. We have lost hydraulic systems. Request immediate vectors to nearest airport." 6289, nearest suitable airport is Gardaia, approximately 80 kilometers ahead. Turn right heading 030 for Gardaia. But 80 kilometers is too far. The fire is consuming the aircraft faster than they can fly to the airport. And now another problem emerges. one that Ben Merabet's careless fuel check failed to catch. The fuel gauges show they are getting critically low on fuel, much lower than they should be for this point in the flight. The rushed pre-flight meant Ben Merabet never verified they had sufficient fuel, never cross-checked the actual fuel upload against the flight plan. They departed with less fuel than required, and now they are burning through it faster than planned due to the emergency situation. At 4:37, the right engine, the only engine still providing thrust, begins showing signs of fuel starvation. The engine parameters fluctuate as the last of the fuel in the tanks is consumed. Ben Merabet realizes with horror that they are about to lose their only functioning engine. "We do not have enough fuel. The engine is going to quit." "What?" Boudra looks at the fuel gauges in disbelief. "How can we be out of fuel? We were only scheduled for 90 minutes to Algiers." But there is no time to explain the error. At 4:38, the right engine flames out, its turbine spooling down as fuel flow ceases. Both engines are now dead. The aircraft has become a glider, descending steadily toward the desert below. If you are as outraged as I am by this captain's negligence, go ahead and hit that like button right now. And please, stay subscribed, because the investigation findings will show you just how many procedures this captain violated. Share this video, because people need to understand that these disasters are not accidents. They are the result of deliberate carelessness. A Boeing 737 without engine power can glide for a limited distance, approximately 2 to 3 nautical miles for every 1,000 feet of altitude. They are at 16,000 feet when the last engine quits. Under ideal conditions, they might be able to glide 35 to 40 kilometers, but these are not ideal conditions. The damaged hydraulic systems have made the aircraft harder to control. The fire is still burning, weakening the structure, and there is no suitable landing site in the desert below. Ben Merabet and Boudra scan desperately for any possibility of an emergency landing. A road, a flat area of desert, anything. But the terrain below is rough, rocky, covered with dunes and boulders. There is nowhere to safely land a large jet. In the cabin, passengers are terrified. They can see smoke coming from the left side of the aircraft. They can feel the aircraft descending rapidly. The flight attendants, trained for emergencies, try to keep people calm, but there is no hiding the severity of the situation. At 4:41, just 24 minutes after the first fire warning appeared, Flight 6289 strikes the desert floor at high speed. The aircraft is in a controlled glide when it impacts, but the ground is rough and unforgiving. The landing gear, still retracted, absorbs none of the impact. The fuselage strikes hard, the nose crumpling, the structure breaking apart. The 737 disintegrates as it slides across the rocky desert. The wings shear off. The fuselage breaks into multiple sections. Fire, already burning in the left engine area, spreads rapidly as remaining fuel ignites. The wreckage comes to rest scattered across half a kilometer of desert, burning fiercely. All 103 people aboard die, either from the impact or from the post-crash fire. There are no survivors. Emergency responders reach the site 40 minutes later, but there is nothing they can do except confirm what they already know. Everyone is gone. The investigation that follows is thorough and damning. Algerian aviation authorities, assisted by Boeing and the United States National Transportation Safety Board, examine every aspect of the accident. What they find is a cascade of negligence by Captain Ben Merabet. The fire warning was real, not a false alarm. There was an actual fire in the left engine compartment, likely caused by a fuel leak or failed component. If Ben Merabet had followed proper procedure when the warning first appeared, if he had discharged the fire bottles immediately, the fire likely could have been extinguished or contained. But his assumption that it was a false alarm allowed the fire to spread unchecked. The fuel quantity was insufficient from the start. The refueling crew made an error, uploading less fuel than required. If Ben Merabet had properly verified fuel quantity during pre-flight, cross-checking the fuel slip against the gauges and the flight plan, he would have caught this error before departure. The flight would have been delayed for additional fueling, but everyone would have survived. The failure to declare an emergency immediately when problems began meant he did not receive priority handling or have emergency services on alert. This delayed their ability to reach a suitable airport quickly. The decision to continue flying for 17 minutes with a fire warning light illuminated, doing nothing, allowed the fire to cause catastrophic damage to hydraulic systems and other critical components. The investigation determines the probable cause of the accident, the captain's failure to follow standard emergency procedures when the engine fire warning activated, compounded by inadequate pre-flight fuel verification. Contributing factors include maintenance issues with the fire detection system that created ambiguity about whether warnings were real, and organizational culture at Air Algérie that tolerated lax adherence to procedures by senior captains. But the investigators are particularly harsh in their criticism of Captain Ben Merabet. They note that at multiple decision points, he had the opportunity to prevent the disaster. After the fire warning appeared, he could have followed procedures. When engine parameters began deteriorating, he could have declared an emergency immediately. During pre-flight, he could have caught the fuel error. Any one of these actions would have prevented the accident. His systematic negligence, his habitual corner cutting, his assumption that procedures were optional rather than mandatory, all of it converged on this one flight with fatal results. For First Officer Boudra, the investigators note that he attempted to intervene multiple times, but was overruled by the captain. His tragedy was being paired with a negligent captain in a culture that made it difficult for junior officers to forcefully challenge senior captains. He died trying to convince his captain to follow procedures. In the aftermath, Air Algérie implemented sweeping changes. They established more rigorous oversight of pilot performance, with special attention to captains who showed patterns of cutting corners or violating procedures. They enhanced crew resource management training, emphasizing the importance of junior officers speaking up when safety is at risk. They implemented better fuel verification procedures to prevent fueling errors. They updated fire detection systems and trained pilots more thoroughly on distinguishing false alarms from real warnings. But for the families of 103 victims, these changes came too late. Their loved ones died because one pilot could not be bothered to do his job properly, because he assumed that shortcuts he had taken 1,000 times before would work one more time. For me as a pilot, this accident represents everything wrong with complacency in aviation. Ben Merabet had been flying for decades. He had accumulated 15,000 hours. He had gotten away with his sloppy practices for years. And that success, that lack of consequences, convinced him that the rules did not really matter, that procedures were suggestions rather than requirements. But procedures exist for a reason. They are written in the blood of previous accidents, learned through tragedy and loss. When you skip a checklist item, you are gambling that this particular shortcut will not be the one that kills you, and the odds might be in your favor for a long time. But eventually, inevitably, one of those shortcuts will coincide with an actual problem, and then people die. The fuel check that Ben Merabet skipped took maybe 90 seconds to do properly. 90 seconds to verify fuel quantity, to cross-check numbers, to ensure the aircraft was properly prepared. He saved 90 seconds by skipping that check, and that 90 seconds cost 103 lives. The fire checklist that he refused to follow takes perhaps 2 minutes to execute. 2 minutes to discharge fire bottles, to shut down the engine properly, to declare an emergency and request immediate landing. He saved 2 minutes by assuming the warning was false. Those 2 minutes allowed the fire to spread and ultimately caused the crash. To any pilot reading this, please understand that there are no unimportant checklist items. There are no procedures you can safely skip because you have skipped them before without consequence. Every checklist exists because someone somewhere died when that item was not completed. Every procedure has a reason, even if that reason is not immediately obvious. Do your pre-flight properly. Verify fuel quantity carefully. Follow checklists completely. When warning lights illuminate, treat them as real until proven otherwise. When problems develop, declare emergencies immediately. Do not assume. Do not guess. Do not take shortcuts. Your career, your pride, your desire to save time, none of it is worth more than the lives of the people who trust you to fly them safely. This accident should never have happened, and that is what makes it so tragic. If this story makes you understand why pilots cannot cut corners, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more real aviation safety stories. Give this video a like to help more people learn these critical lessons. Share it with anyone training to be a pilot, because understanding how negligence kills is the first step to preventing it. Your engagement helps me continue sharing these important cautionary tales. I am Captain Paul Henderson. Thank you for staying with me through this difficult story. Remember that aviation is safe not because airplanes are perfect, but because pilots follow procedures designed to keep them safe, even when things go wrong. The moment you stop following those procedures, you are gambling with lives. Fly safe, follow every checklist, and never assume you can get away with cutting corners. Until next time, this is Captain Paul Henderson, signing off.